Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. Ladies, what does it mean to truly age gracefully? Today, we are going to talk about Black women aging gracefully and some tips for thriving at 50 and beyond. But before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Angela. Welcome to Unapologetically 50 Plus, where we delve into the real, the raw, and the rewarding experiences of Black women 50 and beyond. I also have a huge favor to ask. If you find any value or enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Let YouTube know that you want to see more of my content. It's free and you're helping me build this community. So thank you. I truly appreciate your support. So let me bring on my guest, Christina Springer, and let's talk about this. And I know it's going to be an amazing conversation. How you doing, Miss Christina?
I'm so pleased to be here and
Oh,
so grateful and wonderful.
well, I'm glad you decided to come on because when we talked, you have so many interesting, your background, that you were telling me about is so interesting. So, can you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Oh,
So, where do I
that's
start?
that's so hard. It's so hard to do because when you know the beautiful thing of getting to a certain age
Mm.
is we've had so many lifetimes. And it's like, well, which lifetime would you like to know about? Because I'm sure I have something in one of those lifetimes that's relevant to what you're experiencing now. Or
Exactly.
at least for me. And I've always been an artist,
Uh,
and it was just never an option for me to not choose that. And
okay.
interestingly enough, I was watching something on Octavia Butler recently where she said that this is what she always wanted to do, and anything else was it was non-negotiable. And
Okay.
um, so I've had a many and varied background, uh, which all originates in art. And
Mhm.
that led to nonprofit arts management, and it led to nonprofit. And I was a filmmaker, and I'm
Okay.
a poet, and I published my most recent collection, The Splooge Factory, came out a couple of years ago through Frayed Edge Press.
Uh-huh.
And you can find it through Frayed Edge Press. And I'm a visual artist, and I've been
Okay.
recently living in this really beautiful world. I call it a download,
Hmm.
really, of our Black womanist utopian future, and
Oh, I
and
like that.
everything. So I'm channeling these in my artistic practice. I'm bringing into being these relics from our Black womanist utopian future. So they're all items in a museum in
Okay.
that future, and and this future comes about through um, something I call white plight, which
Hmm.
was a period in time when all white people mysteriously, not quite mysteriously, became extinct.
Oh,
Um,
okay. It
because
sounds familiar, but uh,
um, because of what they called a systemic chronic unlove, and that
mm,
you cannot live so in opposition to universal truths that you will not mutate. And so they almost imploded from inside out because they had mutated to be so out of alignment with universal truth.
wow.
So that's my little thing I'm doing when I
Okay. Well, whenever that comes, I mean, is that going to be, well, so is that going to be a book?
it's an exhibit. So
Where?
I showed it in San Jose, I've shown it in Dayton,
Uh-huh.
I had a show in Pittsburgh. I'm still working on it. A lot of the pieces have been sold. People love these
Oh,
pieces.
really?
And each piece comes, and then there's a little bit of text that goes with them. So I'm trying to put them together
Yeah.
into
Do
some sort of
you do
book.
you collaborate? And I know this is kind of off topic, and then we'll get into the meat of this what we want to talk about today. But do you collaborate with other artists?
I have
You
in the
have?
past.
Okay.
And but now, and I am in the midst of beginning to do some dialogue with another really beautiful young artist
Okay.
uh, named Joy Kemet.
Okay.
And she does these beautiful brooms, which are just works of art in and of themselves. So
Okay.
whether you work with them or not. And so I also design fabrics. So
Oh, okay.
that's where
Okay.
my store came out of, but she loves my fabric design. So we're going to be talking about incorporating some of these fabrics with her brooms. And yeah,
Okay.
and that's going to be really exciting.
Okay. The reason I ask is because the lady that sometimes co-hosts with me, she's also an upcoming artist, and when we're finished with this, I'll have to show you a piece because she painted a piece with me and my husband, um, actually of this picture, and it's really more tribal, artistic, and and
Uh-huh.
I always like to try and if as Black women we can collaborate and do things together, the better. So, but we'll talk about that
Absolutely.
offline.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, so
But
so
no,
it's so yeah, I have spent a lot of time in the past doing collaborations. I love it. I
okay.
love being in dial. I love which kind of brings, you sent me an idea of some things we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And that first idea you'd sent me was about mentoring.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Mentoring. Yeah. And if
And
you,
so
especially like mentoring in art or whatever your, expertise is. Yeah. I think it's important that we, as mature Black women, mentor the next generation underneath us. It's really important. So let's get started. Now, my first question for you. And actually, it is the first question. How can Black women over 50 harness their life experiences to mentor the younger generation?
and I thought about that. And what it brought up for me is the concept of mentoring and what do we mean by mentoring.
Mm.
And um and I thought back over um like I thought back to mentoring is ultimately really about being in relationship with somebody, being in deep and meaningful relationship. And what I've been finding as I've grown older is that when I was younger, I felt like I had to say all the things I knew. And I felt like I needed to be heard about all the things that I knew. And as I've grown older, what I've realized is that it is so much more important to hear. And so for me, mentoring feels more like affirming, listening, and encouraging. And of course, in one of those lifetimes, I've been an educator. I home educated my child. I've taught at the university level.
Oh, okay.
And um, and I began to realize, and I learned a lot of this from my father, who was also a brilliant human being, educator amongst those things. And one of the phrases I grew up with, and one of the phrases my child grew up with, was um, is you listen to all these ideas, and sometimes the ideas are really often left field, and sometimes that's because they're inaccurate, and sometimes it's because they're onto some profound new shift
Hmm.
that we're not privy to because we're older. We've seen so much. And
Right.
so my father's way of handling that with grace was he always asked this question of where can I read more about that? So we'd be talking and I'd say this and I'd be talking about this and that and the other. And he'd say, this is fascinating. But where can I read more about this?
Oh, okay.
Which was his way of saying cite your sources.
Right. Right.
And so I think as mentors, like a lot of people feel that they need to correct or direct or be in a more controlling way of relating.
Right.
of let me help you do this so that you don't get caught up in the mistakes and all of my mistakes have made me a richer person. And yes, I still do have moments where I will think back to some knucklehead thing I did and kind of wince, or some hard-headed moment, and I will kind of shudder. But they are less and less now
Mm-hmm.
as I realize where they led me next.
Yeah.
And I think mentoring is really about being that soft cushion, you
Okay.
know, of, yeah, you could do it that way. And if you want to know more about the time I did it that way, I am so happy to tell you. Um, but you may just want to do it that way and see what happens.
And I like that you say that because you're right. Sometimes we look at, even with our own children, yes, we're supposed to direct them and we're supposed to teach them, yes. But letting folks learn on their own with guardrails, I would say, is sometimes the best way instead of trying to force what you've learned on them. Some people, I was the kind of person, I like to do it the hard-headed way. You know, I like to do it the hard-headed way. And I feel that I learned so much more, even though there were times, yes, I took my mother's advice. And as I got older, I started listening more. I didn't need to bump my head as many times. But I thought learning my way, I got so much more out of it. So, yes, you saying that, you saying, just being a soft cushion, somewhere someone can go and bounce ideas off of you and you listen instead of saying, well, blah, blah, blah. Instead of giving your advice, you're listening. I know one thing my mom used to always say, and I try to say that with my children now that they're, full-fledged adults. And when they were teenagers, depending on what it was, I would say, do you want my opinion? Because
Mhm.
if you say yes, you want my opinion, then you're going to get the hard fact truth of what I think you should or
Yeah.
should not do. Um, so I think that's an amazing way to mentor and I think more young people would be willing to be mentored if they didn't feel like, well, you're being like a second mother or a second father. I just need someone to listen to me and, if I bump my head or I might say, yes, please give me that advice. I might not take it, but at least I'm hearing what you're saying. So I think that's an amazing way to mentor young folks, and young folks would be someone as young as 45, because, you know, they're about to come up on this wonderful age of 50 and beyond, and it's beautiful. And that's what I wanted to ask you. That was supposed to be my first question. I forgot. What for you, what does aging gracefully mean to you?
Mm. You know, I have looked forward to being old since I was in my 20s. I
Wow,
mean,
okay.
because
You're unique.
such I had such amazing elders growing up,
Okay.
and, they were everything I wanted to be.
Mm.
And my grandmother on my father's side, was, the epitome of grace and, um, softness, but she was, ruthless as well.
Ooh,
So
I like her already.
and, and just the way she almost floated through the world,
Okay.
um, with this just aura of she was an empress, she was
Wow.
and all of my elders were like that. I remember my great-grandmother the same way.
Huh.
My mother was another, fierce, fearless lady, is a fierce, fearless lady, she's 94 now.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
oh, and so I always looked forward to the privilege of being in my own skin in that way.
Mm.
And so, and my my grandmother, and I used to watch her do this to people. And I used to be like, one day I'm going to be old enough to do this. And I think I'm almost here because we would be anywhere, just
Uh,
anywhere.
uh,
And she would see some young person acting a fool somewhere. And she would just not march, but she would glide up to them. And she would say she had a very soft spoken, lovely voice.
mhm.
And she would say, I'm old enough to mind your business. Just like that. And then she would read them for filth in the most elegant um, manner. Her command of the English language. She never had to curse, but she was cutting. But she
Yeah.
did it in this soft. And I'm only saying this because I love the young people. And when you walk about doing things like this, it does not speak to who you really are, which I know to be a magnificent. She was so.
You'd be like, is she chastising me or complimenting me?
And they would hang there and they would slink off or whatever. They'd do whatever she'd ask them to do, adjust their
Right.
pants or turn their hat around backwards or turn their music down, whatever it was.
Whatever. Right.
And I was like, I want to be old enough to do that
Yeah.
one day, to
Yeah.
move like that
Yeah.
through the world.
Yes.
And so that's been my goal since I was a young person. How do I become so settled within me
Right.
that I am just moving through the world with a ruthless grace?
Mm. I love it. I love it. Yes. Yes. So, with you being an artist and having, just a plethora of your background in art, what ways can art be used as a therapeutic tool for Black women embracing this aging process?
I that question threw me for a loop because art without art, um, I cannot live, right? And in my younger years,
Hmm.
and you see it in a lot of young artists,
Hmm.
art is their therapy, right? Especially with poetry. I'll go to some poetry readings lately and be like, oh, right, you're still working out your mother issues. Okay, this is a fascinating way to do that. And I love the use of metaphor with this current moment of trying to figure out who you are in relation to your mother. Quite, quite
Okay.
lovely. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And then after a certain point, you grow older.
Hmm.
And I think in some ways, I think um, to be uh, an artist is to be constantly in dialogue with the ideas around you. I think. I feel like I'm always in conversation,
Yeah.
whether I'm in conversation with myself, or I'm in conversation with the world, or I'm in conversation. For me these days, it's very much in conversation with the spirits.
Right,
um,
right.
and and so uh, as we grow older, we have uh, I, I I don't know how to say this, but I've noticed lately that our physical relationships have shrunk
Yeah.
with the advent of social media.
Yes.
And um, and I think more people are more isolated, I think, than they've been before.
Right.
And some of the remedies we as Black women used to, or Black women of a certain background, I want to
Mhm.
say, used to have in place. Even Black women, we always gathered. I'm looking through,
Yeah.
uh, I'm going through a lot of my mother's things right now, and I'm going through mountains of pictures of the circlettes and the girlfriends and the alpha wives and the deltas and so much swag. Um, by the way, the alpha wives have the best swag ever, ever, ever. I'm
Is
like,
that so what's the Alpha Wives?
the wives of Alpha Phi Alpha.
Oh, okay.
They're on the
Okay. Oh,
thing.
okay. Okay.
And so, and so, but I was looking at these groups, which
Uh,
are not necessarily dying out, but a little bit, maybe dwindling a little bit.
yeah.
And I look back at the function they served. And the function they served was to be in conversation so that you weren't out there on your own, casting about in the wilderness. You had
Right.
people you could rely on that you could trust. And with social media dwindling, with social media taking over and changing our relationships from, I want to say, uh, naked, these physical relationships where you actually
Right.
have to go through it and you have your transgressions and you talk and you work it through it's so easy to just mute somebody or
Right.
unfollow somebody
Right.
but you couldn't do that with these older groups. And so as that relates to art is a way to have rigorous conversation with yourself or with God or um, with that person who slighted you, um, to work it out, um, to navigate all the levels of what it means. And I think as we grow older, sometimes our circles get a little bit tighter
Yeah.
and smaller.
Yeah.
And I think art serves as I'm never alone because I have my art.
You have your art.
I have my muse.
Yeah. Do you use or do you use art sometimes to document your own personal histories or legacies? Has that been a part of some of your art?
Not in my early years, I did a lot of I had a lot of struggle in my youth. I will admit that. We all struggle in our
We all
youth.
struggle.
We
Yeah.
all struggle to figure out who we are, where we belong in the world, um, and especially in the context of my family.
Okay.
Uh, I have one poem I refer back to all the time, and the last stanza, it's all about my grandmother, all the mothers in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And the last stanza is I could never rip the goddess from the woman.
Mm.
Here I am, a woman clothed only in vocabulary.
Mm.
And 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 that is, but every young woman goes through that, where these larger than life people, where we struggle with who we are.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I forgot the question. I just went off. I'm so sorry. Went off on
Basically,
my own thing.
yeah, basically the question was about art and the process of aging. How can we use that as Black women?
Yeah. So I think as we grow older, it is time to exercise some of those demons still. I
Yeah.
mean, for me, not so much. For me, I'm visioning the world I want my descendants to live in.
Mm.
So no, I don't write as much about myself anymore, and I
Okay.
did that when I was younger.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and then I left that pretty much when I sort of had my foray into the performance poetry world.
Mhm.
Um, and I was much more political. I
Mm.
was very, very political. I still am very political in my
Okay.
own special, unique way. But I used to so I never really, and I should
Yeah. No,
document my
you
family.
should. Yeah, you definitely
But
should.
But
And
other
we
people have done that for me. So
Yeah. And we also have to remember that art, because, when I think of art, my brain says, oh, painting and sketching and all that. But art covers so many areas. So if painting or sketching is not your forte, it might just, like you said, poetry, writing. I would even consider
memoiring.
memoiring. Yeah, I would even consider art to be, even knitting, even crocheting. There's
Yes.
all types of art. And I was also going to say that the lady I was talking to you about earlier, that was her entry into art when she was going through her own stuff, and art became a part of how she let all that out. And some of it was for, some of it was for the loss of, someone she truly cared about. Some of it was for, getting older and now seeing herself as the matriarch in the family. So um there were so many things that she was putting on canvas, to help her deal with whatever she was going through at the time. So I think art is amazing. And even if you're not a painter like me, I can't sketch or paint to save my life, but I like to write. I enjoy, putting pen or pencil to paper. So you just have to find what works for you and, use that as a method for, if you're feeling some type of way about getting older, put it down,
Put it down.
paint it, whatever works for you.
I strongly believe people should journal.
Yes, yes.
And I think what you're doing too with these time capsule moments that you're
Mm,
doing with Love Park Connection
yeah,
are so important.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and also important to hold the history of your history,
yeah,
because we all matter to somebody.
yes.
We all make some kind of difference, whether we know it or not, in
Right,
somebody's life.
right.
And so we should preserve these moments. It just, even if in the family, to go back and say, oh, your great grandmother, um, she knit these beautiful hats, or
Right,
she had
right.
such an idea,
And I
um,
think we've lost that. I think we've lost a lot of that, um, like storytelling, like our ancestors used to do, storytelling about who your family is, what your history is. We've lost that. And you're
mm,
right, has a lot of it's been lost because there's not the same type of communication that there used to be when you and I were younger and coming up, and that particular generation. It's really been lost, and I kind of blame, because I'm a Gen X, and I kind of
mhm.
blame us to a certain degree, because even though I was raised by the silent generation, when I started raising my own kids, as we all sometimes do, I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna do it my way, and then we lose that connection. We lose that history because we don't pay it forward. We don't bring it forward. We don't tell our kids about, your great grandmother, blah blah blah. We lose it. So that's sad to me. That's sad to me. So got to figure out how to bring it back on some level, whether it's through art or whatever. We got to figure out how to bring it back.
Even journals,
Yeah.
or and we don't write like, I was recently, like I said, going through my parents' things, and and I'm very fortunate in that the history center wants their papers, our local history center.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, and I've been realizing how important the saving of all these pieces of paper are. And going back and looking at these journals, or going back and looking at these notes for articles or whatever,
Yeah.
are so important.
Yeah.
And even if you're not going to be sending them to an archive, just going back and looking,
Yeah.
being able to know them in this other way,
Mm-hmm.
is it helps you orient yourself to the world. It's like, if you don't know where you're from, you don't know where you're going.
Exactly.
And that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason.
Right. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
A lot of us, and especially X's and millennials, are spend a lot of time rejecting,
Yeah.
and without, I think, without empathy and compassion.
Right.
To like, as I have grown older, I had a wonderful, my father and I, thick as thieves, cut from the same
Beautiful.
cloth,
Oh.
right?
Uh-huh.
My mother and I clashed.
And that's funny. I was just the opposite. My mother and I were like that. My father and I clashed. So,
Okay. And as I grew older, I was able to shift my relationship to her because I began to be able to understand her better.
yeah.
And so even just writing it through and thinking about who they are helps to approach those generations whom we rejected. I rejected my mother's philosophy of child rearing outright. Like, much, I'm doing it my own way. And it wasn't until much later I was parenting in the way that my father's family has parented for generations. But
Mm-hmm.
because he was the male,
Mm-hmm.
well, everyone assigns child rearing and the how the household is run to the mother, and everyone
Right.
looks at the mother, and nobody defines it in that way from the patriarchal perspective or
Right.
whatever. And but to go back and with empathy and compassion to put myself in my mother's shoes, and
Yeah.
I could understand better what she was doing, where she came from, why she was the way she was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you begin to, with the pandemic, as I began to blog about, people were panicking and buying toilet paper. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have, 2 cases of toilet paper in your closet? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
And
Right.
I began to think about, and my how pantries, and how I'm always ready for the Great Depression. And why? Because I was raised by a woman who lived in the Great Depression
Oh, okay.
and was
Okay.
always prepared
Yeah.
for scarcity.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I
Right.
realized what a lost skills. People were saying, "What do you mean? How do you do this? How do you take an inventory of your how do you rotate through items? How do you meal prep?" And I couldn't believe it, this lost art, because we were so busy. Everyone was so busy doing it their own
Right.
way,
Right. Right.
that they didn't grab onto these little wisdoms that are what's going to see us through hard times.
Right. Right. I definitely agree with that.
Sorry, we
So
went so off topic.
that's okay. This is what it's about. It's about talking. I mean, that's why I say I have my notes, but sometimes going off topic, and it's really not off topic. It's also teaching. It's also hearing from your perspective, your life's journey of what you've learned and talking about it. That's what my whole podcast is about learning for me especially because it was also a selfish reason is me learning from other women who, might be the same age, might be older, but me gathering their wisdom. So, what can I learn from you? So that, again, it was also a selfish reason. So, for you, have there been any, as we go age, we worry about our health. We're like going, okay, how do I maintain a better sense of health and, mind, body, and spirit? So, are there some unconventional health and wellness practices that have proven beneficial for you?
Well, uh, I have always been a low on the totem pole kind of. I mean, like I said earlier, I was very political from a very early age, and my family's always been very political. So we've always sort of lived in opposition to the mainstream, even though they were quite conventional. You know, my parents were
Right.
both professional people and upstanding members of the community and all of that. They were really quite, my father especially was really quite radical. And 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 so in my early years, I was very into naturalism. Um, like way back in the 80s, I was learning about herbalism
Okay.
when I was until a couple of years ago, I'd been dreadlocked. I've been dreadlocked almost my entire life.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I had beautiful, long down to my behind, below my behind dreadlocks
Okay.
because I wasn't participating in the patriarchy.
Right.
And, and when I said I'm not participating in the patriarchy, I meant it. And I followed it
He
up
said
with
10
certain
toes down, 10
things,
toes
right?
down.
And I think that's prepared me
uh,
for um, for where we are now. On the flip side of that, um, I had a health scare a couple of years ago,
okay.
um, because I was also, you know, I was a young um, avant-garde artist
Mm-hmm.
and everything that meant.
Right.
And in fact, recently I'm in a book of 60 years of Pittsburgh's avant-garde artists, and I was like, when did we become like a like a history?
Right.
But
When did we become history? Oh, that hit hard.
we were punks, and you know, there were like all these dirty white people and black folks with dreads and punk music and hip hop, and I mean
Right.
before hip hop was a thing, and spoken word, and
Exactly.
and
Um,
and with some of the things that they, you know, staying out late, drinking lots of beer, uh,
right.
and I smoked, and that was not a great thing. So anyway, I had a health scare. I have COPD,
Okay.
and and it got really bad. Um, and um, and I had moved away from herbalism because I'm with my spouse
Mm-hmm.
is uh, a, a geeky type. He's a software engineer, and
Okay.
you know, he loves the science. And so I had moved away from the herbalism stuff and moved more towards allopathic medicines,
Okay.
which did not serve me well. And
Mm.
so when I got sick,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been raising this beautiful child of ours, um, and they had this from a very early age interest in herbalism, and so I would throw them what little things I'd known. So they got very into foraging and herbal remedies, and when I got sick and I could get no help from the medical establishment, literally, I mean, it was, you know, the crisis for healthcare for Black women is scary.
Right.
It's terribly frightening.
Right. I'm actually going to have a holistic practitioner come on.
See, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
This because this is as we are aging gracefully, and with the current crisis for Black women, for health in general, but for Black women's health
Mm-hmm.
specifically,
Right.
my child's interest in herbalism saved my life.
Mm.
They foraged, they made me tinctures and
Mm.
teas and kept me alive until we could get a good healthcare practitioner
Mm-hmm.
to sort me out.
Right. Yeah.
And so having had that love myself and having my child inherit that through the air that they breathed and
Yeah.
just the way I moved through the world with them as a child,
Yeah.
brought me back to myself in essence, or my core self, that young radical, screw the establishment, we're going to do it all on our own type of person. And so I would say, as Black women, it is so important for us to understand health wise
Yeah.
all of our options
Right.
and find reputable practitioners.
Right.
Because my child was, I knew a couple of herbalists, and I was lucky enough because I was home educating my child to tuck them up under them, and as they were growing and forming their own practice. But know all the things you can do,
Right. Right.
and also um, I don't know how to say this. I'm just gonna.
Just say
I'm
it.
I'm I'm known for telling the truth, and I strive so hard to be like my grandmother
Yeah.
and be graceful about it. But in these days and times, especially, I feel the time for surface discussions are over.
Yes.
And so for example, all my life, my beauty aids were enough sleep,
Hmm.
Dr. Bronner's soap, and olive oil, because I was not participating. I'm not participating in the patriarchy.
Right.
I'm not allowing the patriarchy to tell me I'm not beautiful. I'm not allowing the patriarchy to suck me into their endless round of consumerism, to buy all the products that they have doctored, to like half these lotions out here
Hmm.
actually do not do the opposite for your skin.
Exactly. Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know,
Right.
they make
Right.
you dependent upon them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I say, performing a thorough investigation on what you're willing to participate in,
Hmm.
what are alternative solutions, and then following them
Right.
is the most important thing for us health wise.
And I agree. I agree. I've
And can we do better? I have a list of areas I can do better in for
right.
health, but um, even even how we eat. I had some friends who are Nawat, and they had I don't remember the phrase in Nawat anymore, but it was food is the first medicine.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah.
And what are we eating? The things that we love so much. When you look historically, why our grandmothers and great grandmothers were living to 90,
And
100,
and a healthy 90, not
and
not
right,
right, not in a uh skilled nursing facility. They were living as healthy 90s, and some of them were smoking. But again,
exactly.
the type of cigarettes they were smoking, and I'm not condoning smoking any cigarettes, but the type that they were smoking is way different than what's on the market today. So, yeah, definitely.
And
And
and so yeah,
and even for me growing up, and it kind of our lot in that aspect, our lives are pretty similar because my stepmother, who unfortunately passed before she hit 50, but she had cancer for at least, and I could get these numbers wrong, but at least 20 years. She never did chemo. She did all holistic remedies. She even did some stuff in Mexico, but she never did chemo. She never did radiation. And she lived, even though she died young, you know, those years that she was still on this earth were, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Quality of life. Or she had a decent quality of life where she could raise my sister, who's much younger than I am, but raise my sister, and not be burdened with the illness and the sickness of the chemotherapy. She was into the acupuncture. She did the herbal medicine. That's why I learned about Dr. Bronner's, you know. Um, and while she was still going to traditional, Western doctors, she would listen to what they say. She listened to their diagnosis, and then she'd go in. And I have one of her books. Um, I forgot the name of the book, but yeah, it's a book that she passed on down. And she would just go in her book and say, okay, what this is what they told me, but let me look in my book and see what ways can I help remedy this in a natural way. So that I think that's very important that we have those options, that we're not just going by
And being able to
traditional
use them
Western
all,
medicine. Huh?
not and being able to use them all. People
Yes.
think that they
Yes.
have to be all in on one thing or
Oh,
all in on another.
right.
And really the the where we are best positioned is when we know what all of our available resources are,
Right.
and we understand them,
Right.
not just know, like, oh, I know that this one does that.
Right.
No, do you know the plant? Have you met the plant? Have you spent time with the plant?
Right.
Talk to the plant. Do you
All
also
those
know about,
things.
do you know the philosophy behind it?
Right.
um, I'm a great advocate for knowing all the things. It's like, I am not an owl. I'm more like a raven. I collect shiny objects. It's like shiny factoid over here and shiny factoid over here. But having the ability to hunt it down and research it
Yeah.
adequately with multiple sources from peer-related journals, peer-reviewed journals, is so important.
Right.
Taking the time. No, this takes time, but
It
it's
does.
time that you're investing in yourself. It's an
Right.
act of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
It's an act of rebellion and resistance.
Right.
It's an act of love for those around you,
Right.
because the more you care for yourself, the better the others around you are, because they get the benefit of having you.
Exactly. And also, and with that being said, even if you can't do what you're saying, all those resources and really diving deep, have trusted sources that you can go to and say, hey, can you help me understand A, B, C, and D? Or can you, do you have, a holistic practitioner that you can refer me to that you've used and they're good? So use your resources as well. And you do have to remember that using holistic, practices takes time. It's not like the, pharmaceutical medicine that is supposed to act quickly. It takes time because it's working with your body. It's a mind, body, spirit, holistic healing. So we have to remember that as well.
And it has its limits, and
Yeah.
I mean, that was a lesson I learned painfully
Mm.
at a very early age. And that's why I say research it, understanding philosophies, find somebody who's reputable, and not somebody who is the fad person with the 500,000 followers on social media. It's
Right.
like, those are the people you probably want to avoid, because they're building a brand.
Right. Yes.
They're not, they're not inhabiting the fullness of what that path means.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're not living that path.
Right. Right.
Uh, mm, yes. I'm seeing there's a very popular herb book out there on the market right now that is so filled with misinformation. And
Yeah.
I blocked her name, and I'm not going to say it here anyway, because we're not opening ourselves up to any scrutiny in
Okay.
that manner. But there is a very, very, very popular Black woman out here hawking a dangerous book, and
Oh,
she's all over social medias. And um, so it really is, go find somebody who has an elder, who has a
right.
lineage, and who has been in it, who is walking a philosophy, who is
Definitely.
inhabiting that way of being. Um, because it can kill you.
Well, I'm gonna
And
have to ask offline
very
who that is. Well, I'll ask you that offline.
I blocked her name, but I like deleted her, but I will hunt it down and
Okay.
send it to you, because it's
Okay.
very next time I see it, because it's everywhere. It pops up in my feed all the time.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So, purpose and passion. at this wonderful age? How do we find, how do we keep that going? How do we, if we've lost it, how do we refine that purpose and passion in our 50s and beyond?
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine losing your purpose and passion.
Some people, some women have.
Well, you know, what I thought, is, I think you know,
It's why it's just so, well, I mean, it's so foreign to you that you can't even answer the question. You're like,
no,
what do you
well,
mean you lost
like,
it?
what keeps me going is, I like I all my entire life I've just made myself up as I went along. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
I've just I'm constantly changing. I am a new person every year.
You're reinventing.
And not even reinventing, I'm just bringing forward things that were underexpressed previously
Okay.
or subduing things that have had their moment in the limelight. Right? Because
Yeah.
we all of us as individuals we're so full of richness, but we're told that we're not. From where all of the world conspires to tell us that we are very small and
Mhm.
we're very powerless and
Mhm.
we're very that there's not enough,
Right.
uh, that
Right.
um, the world lies. There's I call it the lying world,
Yeah.
and then there's the truth, and
Right.
but the truth is always changing
Right.
because you're not happy all the time. Who's
Right.
happy all the time?
Right.
Um, uh, but how do we make space for that? And I got to bring my grandmother into the equation because back when I was younger, I was like, I'd ask my grandma, "How are you doing, grandmother?" And she'd say, "I'm doing." I'd say, "But grandmother, really, how are you?" I am. And so therefore I am grateful. and I wanted her to be in her feelings,
Right.
as people with hormones want others to be all in their feelings. Um, and, and she said, if I told you about everything that goes on, that happens, we would sit here all day and have nothing interesting to talk about.
Mm.
And the other thing she said to me, see, this is why I wanted to grow into that person, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing she said that was so wise, and I want to pass it on, while we're talking about we are filled with happiness. We just sometimes are not able to access it because the world lies to us. And that's not to say that we don't have sadness, but my grandmother used to say, I wake up every morning and I sit on the side of my bed and I give myself precisely 5 minutes to feel profoundly sorry for myself.
Oh,
And then I get on with my day.
yeah, d- get it over with. Feel
Take your
sorry,
moment.
take that moment, and then after you've had that moment, it's time to stop. It's time to keep pushing forward.
Right?
I
and
like
so
that.
and so how do you find your purpose and your passion is what what pleases me? What in any given moment, what and especially as we're older and I 50s, you're not quite retired yet, but as you move towards 60 and you're moving towards retirement,
Right.
um, more and more you have opportunities to do. You don't have to worry about as much about your children.
Right.
If you are in a relationship, you've been there for a while, then you pretty much figured out
How
how
that's
the
work.
cogs of that, and you oil that.
Right.
And so the next question is to do what pleases you.
Right. I say find a passion pilgrimage.
You know,
Go on a journey, that you want to go on. Find that
and,
journey that you've had to push to the back because you were raising kids and being, working and all those things that take up so much time.
and the beauty, and here we talk about mentoring is I'm part of my child has a business
Mm,
um, uh, that I didn't understand at first, and I get completely now, and called Black Dream Escape. And
mm,
they are a therapeutic arts practice
mm.
um, dedicated to uh, using rest as a therapeutic modality for Black and Indigenous people.
Okay.
And they talk a lot about the psychology, the generational rest debt. Um,
Mm,
they're profound thinkers, but they are, um, and this is why it's so wonderful to be in community with young people because they grow you. But even like, why do you have to have a purpose and passion? Why can you not just be?
mm,
As Black women, when have we ever been encouraged to just be?
mm,
Like Alice Walker said in one of the essays in our In Search of Our Mother's Garden, that the job of a writer, part of the job of a writer is to sit and stare out of the window. That's revolutionary. Why do Black women have to do anything?
mm,
And sometimes when we are in such a state of busy, our minds are not able to receive um, the bounty of what the unseen world has to offer us. Whether that's 12 lines of a poem you never knew you could write, or the exact perfect way a line fits on a page, or um, the never before seen pattern for a quilt. Black women are kept so busy, so constantly inventing, so constantly serving, that at this point, what if our purpose is to just be?
mm. I love that.
Why can we not be passionate about being?
Mm, I like that. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense because when you can just be, and just what you talking about it, when we can just be, I would think, I'm not a doctor, not a holistic practitioner, I would think that would calm the central nervous system, that would calm your body because you just talking about it and me visualizing it while you're sitting here talking about it, I felt a,
Yes. And imagine that becoming a practice.
yeah,
Annika and Wynn talk a lot about developing a rest practice in the same way that you have a yoga practice or a wellness or a Zumba practice.
right.
Whatever. We need to have a rest practice.
Yeah. We don't get enough of it. We
And
don't get
and
enough of
and
it.
they're not just talking. Annika is a licensed therapist. She's studied this. She's looked at the way in which we as Black people are continuously positioned to be in a state of unrest.
Right. Right. Right.
So, cultivating that is a beautiful purpose and passion
Yeah.
of that as a self-care thing.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I am resting.
I am resting.
I am being.
Right. I
And
like that.
from that, so, and it's funny because I didn't understand what they were at first when they were talking about this. And then I began to realize how much a part of my artistic practice
Mhm.
that had been all my life.
Mhm.
From the time I was 20 something and read that essay and, oh, how do I be a better writer? I sit and I stare out the window and look at my garden, you know?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I
Yeah,
began to do that and, all the things burbled up.
yeah. I like that. Yeah, more rest, more just being is what we need to focus on more. Okay, with that said, I'm ready to go take a nap now.
Oh, well, I should be like, well, let's get off and do that because
So, how do you think as Black women over 50, how can we reshape societal expectations about aging?
see, and again, this comes back to the being. Um, and I thought about that. Um, uh, why do we have to fix anything for anybody? Why do we have to change societal's expectations? Why don't we just go about the business of being ourselves?
Right.
Why don't we just go about the business of being in the fullness of this beautiful time in our lives? Um, when we were when we were talking earlier uh, about menopause and about um, I was like, my menopause was fabulous. It was 2 years of wine and whining, and then boof, it was
Whining, whining.
it was literally 2 years of wine and whining. And then it was poof, it was gone.
Gone.
And um and this newer, like more rational me set in as the hormones fled.
Mhm.
And and I must have had a lot of hormones in my youth. I mean, I was just full. And as an older woman, I look sometimes at younger women and I'm like, wow, they're doing too much. And then I'm realizing, oh my goodness, the poor dears,
Yeah.
they're just full of hormones. They
They're
can't
full
help it.
they're full of hormones and then they're eating this crappy food and it goes back to that. They're eating the crappy food. They're probably drinking way too much. They're doing so much to their bodies that I'm sure their hormones are just everywhere.
And
Everywhere.
so,
I mean,
and so,
I can't even imagine having to go through that.
so, so I'm thinking, why should we shape society's expectations? Why don't we set some expectations for ourselves?
Yeah,
Like, I'm gonna just be.
just gonna
And in being, I'm gonna be fabulous.
yeah.
And in my hormone-free, unaddled, rational, open, centered self,
Mhm.
my magnificence will ripple out to all those who are touched by me every day. In that same way that my grandmother's magnificence just rippled out from her and touched everyone around her.
Yeah.
She didn't say, I'm going to change society's expectations. She changed her expectations for herself on how she was and was not going to be and or be treated in this world.
Okay.
And it goes back to that old feminist, the personal is political. Um, the personal is very political. Um, even if we are just one blip on somebody's radar of, wow, look at her. If that's 50, I want that.
Yeah.
What am
Right.
I going to do to get to there?
Right.
Because I spent so much of my youth observing these magnificent creatures and saying, how did they become like they were? And how they became like they were was that they stopped worrying about everybody else.
But
Not in a way that says, I don't care if the world burns and crashes. I don't care
mhm,
if my family runs amok. In the way that I will wear this fuchsia scarf because it pleases me today. I will wear bright red lipstick because it brings me joy.
right.
Um, and if people say dark skinned old women should not wear red lipstick, they can go figure that out for themselves because none of my business.
Right. And that's a nice way of putting it. I want to put it that way, but no, you're being you're being graceful. But the one thing that I know that just hearing you talk about, your family and the women that you looked up to, a lot of us didn't have that. Not saying I didn't. My mom was my
Mhm.
mentor and the one I looked up to. But for the women that didn't have that, you know, how, what would be your suggestion to maybe they're 45, maybe they haven't hit 50 yet, or maybe they're in their 50s. What would be your suggestion, or how could you help? What would be the suggestion if they didn't have that type of mentor, that type of, someone to look up to? Where can they go, or what can they do to find that and to embrace that within
Mhm. Mhm.
themselves?
Dream it up. Again, I got to come back to the being, right?
Hmm.
When we're just sitting in those moments of just nothing, just enjoying the way the sunlight is hitting the trees just so to create those interesting shaped shadows on the lawn, right?
Hmm.
And in those moments, um, our creativity is unleashed, and uh, we are so powerful. We have to connect to our imaginations.
Hmm.
And so I talk a lot about time traveling. Like if we sit here right now and we think of our like our younger self in her most foolish moment, right?
Yeah.
And we go to her and we pat her on the back, we give her a great big hug, and we say, you're gonna be okay. I see you in a couple years, and you're gonna look back on this, and you're gonna maybe shiver a little bit, but you're gonna shrug and you're gonna laugh, and it's gonna shape you to do some extraordinary thing, you know.
Mhm.
And it's gonna shift how you view the world, and it's gonna help you because it's a hard lesson that you're learning, and then but then you'll have known it, and you won't be there again in the future.
Yeah.
And so now you've gone back and you've it's like now she's available now, like because she still exists, right? But now she's had a moment of healing because we've loved her. And
Mm.
so I think we have to almost time travel ourselves, right?
Okay.
We have to like imagine like imaginary friend. Like who is she? And what is she like? And how can I get her to teach me how to be this? Like, what do I really need? I mean, we have to be, vulnerable with ourselves. It's so scary to look at those really dark, unlovable places, those places that we shy away from. And we have to go to them with compassion and say, what can I do for you that will heal that? You know? and then give that to ourselves.
Okay.
Like, what did I want when what did I want? What do I want? And how can I give that to myself? And who around me can I go get that from?
Right.
I have some just terrific young people in my life. And young people are wonderful for growing you up. Because they hold you to as honest as you are with them, as real as you are with them, there is that imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And so they invite you into your highest self. They should invite you into your highest self.
Okay.
Um, and that, coming back to that mentoring idea is sometimes we have to mentor ourselves.
Mm.
I was a great list maker in my youth. I used to make incredible lists of my ideal partner. And I would make these all the qualifications. And, and negotiable, non-negotiable,
Right. Right.
absolutely.
Right.
And, I'll tell you, every time I've done that, I have ended up in a long-term monogamous relationship that was quite extraordinary. And they always came to be. We can write ourselves into being, I believe.
I do too. I do too.
So if we don't have those models, we have to go, I also people watch. I love to watch people go out,
Right. Yeah.
go
Mm-hmm.
watch some elders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, see what you like and what you don't like.
Right. Yeah.
And or find some, it's interesting. Um, like I said, I had a contentious relationship with my mother. And the day I realized that I didn't need my mother to mother me
Mm-hmm.
was the day that our relationship changed for the better.
Mm.
The
Okay.
day I realized that I needed to I needed to I needed to give her what she needed. But she was not ever going to be the one who's going to give me what I needed from her. But she
Mm-hmm.
was the only one who could give me that.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yeah.
are many and plenty other women who could give that to me.
Okay.
And what I could do is learn from how magnificent she is with what she does, right? And I could learn many incredible skills from her. Um, she's an incredible planner. I learned how,
Mm-hmm.
I took all of the things that were useful
Mm-hmm.
and embraced them, and everything that was not useful to me could stay with her.
Okay. Okay. I like that.
And they will show
Yeah.
up. When you know what you need,
Yes.
it will come.
Right. Right. The ancestors will bring it to you.
They will. They
They'll bring it to
will.
you. Yeah, definitely. Speaking of ancestors, so how can Black women use spiritual practices, to find a deeper meaning?
Can we pause for just one moment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just run on for just real quick. I apologize. Part of being older is,
Gotta do what you gotta do.
sometimes we got to take the medicine that, yeah. The question, you want to know spirituality.
Right.
And give me the focus of that question again.
So, how can Black women use spiritual practice to find a deeper meaning and joy in later life?
Black women are some of the most spiritual people out here.
Facts.
We really are.
No, facts.
And,
Yes.
and ooh, this is such a hard one for me because I have always been a very spiritual person. It is just as, and Black women, it's almost like saying, how do we as Black women like breathe? Like, can
Mhm.
you talk about breathing? Like, teach me how to breathe. 'Cause
Right. Right.
it feels like that to me.
Mhm.
Um, and so I guess it's like, what are we doing with our spirituality? How is our spirituality allowing us to be of service,
Mm.
right? Um, Especially as elders. What are we offering to the community?
Mhm.
And that's, spirituality in is such a wide when it comes to Black women, what are we talking about? What
Right. Right.
um because there's as many different expressions of being in spirit
Mhm.
and for our community as there are women.
Right.
Um, and so this is, yeah, I found this um, to be such a challenging question um, because I'm in a daily practice, you know,
Okay.
um, is 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 how can we live our spirituality better?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and that again ties into purpose. Um, and I haven't seen. I think by this age, most of us tend to be fairly settled in the what we're doing,
Mhm.
and so um, I see a lot of casting about on the socials, and especially as it relates to um, African descended spiritualities.
Right.
And
Yes.
I'm seeing so much nonsense and mayhem out there. Um, uh, Social media has, I think, done horrific things to our ways of being in spirit. And it's tempting as older women to step out there and hang our shingle out there on the interwebs and and be all wise, all knowing.
Right.
And um, and it disturbs me because uh, because it's becoming so superficial. I
Mm.
see we as the young African Americans today, I feel are just we are at this, I feel at this moment we are in a spiritual famine.
Really? Okay.
Ooh, I do. And
Okay.
I feel, and what I see on social media are a lot of people selling sugar water,
Mm,
and I
okay.
see a lot of people drinking it up,
Mhm.
and, uh, and, so I think if you are really in your thing,
Mhm.
I think being a safe harbor
Mhm.
is 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 important.
So what does your spirituality look like? Just a quick example. What does your spirituality look like?
I'm an Olarisha,
Okay.
so I am initiated to Obatala,
Okay.
and, uh, and my spirituality looks like, um, dealing with my ancestors, not dealing with, but being in relationship with my ancestors every day, being in relationship with my Orisha.
Okay.
Um, it means, hosting spiritual gatherings for the few earnest people who want
Okay.
to come and study and learn.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
uh, it me that's yeah,
Okay.
it's an everyday thing for me.
Okay.
It's it's a way of being in the world, of, um, I walk with the force of the spiritual world around me, and I give it as much attention as I give to any living or any embodied
Mhm.
spirit that there is. Um, yeah,
And do you,
that's why I'm struggling with this so much.
no, no, I
As
mean, and it makes sense because I know for me, I when I was younger, what I thought about spirituality, because I was raised as Catholic, then went into Christianity, and then all that sound, after a while, I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't feel anything, and then I started looking at different spiritual um, areas, and can I say that I have actually found what spiritual path I'm going to walk? No, but I can say that what I am doing and how I am relating to spiritual practices is totally different. And I feel so much more at peace than when I was in the actual church.
mhm. And see,
So,
yeah, that what you're getting at, I think is what is so hard for me to, what I've been finding so hard to express is, for me, everything is about relationships,
yes,
and relationships take work.
yes.
Whether it's your relationship with the unseen world,
Hmm.
or your relationship with your partner,
Yeah.
or your children, or your friends, or your how are you in relationship to the world? Like, for example, I have trees that I'm friends with, you know, I have a relationship with that tree.
Hmm.
Uh, I say hello to it when I go by. I give it a pat on the trunk. Uh, the I am in relationship to the living energies around me, and it gives me, it fills me,
Yeah.
right? It's one of those things that makes me feel wonderful, that makes me, um, that gives me purpose, um, that, um, that helps me sometimes just be, you
Just
know?
be. Just be.
And and so, like, I have a relationship with my yard, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I know
Right.
all gossip in my yard. My yard is a busy, hilarious place, you know?
I want to talk to you more about again, this is going to be another one offline topics, but I would like to talk to you more about your spiritual practices. Um, for me, you know, I'm still looking. I have, I rely heavily on my intuition. I rely heavily on, my energy. But I want to talk to you more about what your spiritual practices, and we can do that offline as well. That's just for me. I'm gonna be selfish. That's for me.
And before I took this, before I went through the door, before I became a priest, um, or an initiate, um, I delved into realms of conjure,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't say hoodoo because we're not. Um, my family is Afro Caribbean, so
Hmm.
that's not within our physical lineage, right?
Okay.
And but yes, this is a great. It's a yeah, but we can talk about that at some point because Black women, we have an innate magic that again the world has told us we don't have,
Yeah.
and we have a way of relating
Yeah.
uh, that is part of just who we are,
Yeah.
and our spirituality is everything, all the time, every day. And I think people think of spirituality as something separate,
Right. Right.
and it's not
It's
separate
not.
at all.
It's who you. I would say, and maybe I'm not totally correct, but it's maybe you just said that it's who you. It is. It's who you are. It should it should be your daily walk. It should be something that when you wake up, that it surrounds you. It's in you, it surrounds you, it's with you at all times. Yeah.
And and or what is your faith? And I don't want to say religion,
Mm-hmm.
but what is your faith inviting you to achieve, to aspire to? So, for
Mm.
example, I'm an Olarisha, but I also have a number of friends who are very, very Christian, who really and like really Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and but and they, they are they're in relationship with that very specific good um, Jesus Christ energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's how they walk in the world as Christians, how they love their neighbors, how they do not judge, how
Right.
they
Right.
are compassionate, how they are generous, how they look towards tending the poor, all of those, how they are in many ways anti-establishment and
Mm.
corruption,
Right.
all of those things
Mm-hmm.
they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they live in they live in that. And
Yeah.
regardless of what name you put on it, what our spirituality should inspire us to do is be people of good character.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you are really living your if you are really living your spirituality, then you are constantly working, because sometimes it is work,
Yeah.
to be a person of good character.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other thing that I would always want to see, um, is whatever your spirituality, your religious beliefs, your however you want to word it, that we respect each other's
Yes,
spiritual walk.
yes,
There's
yes,
too many times you'll see, and I see it, unfortunately, I see it more in the religious establishment where if you're not this religion, then I can't really be bothered, or I'm judging, or whatever. But if we could all just respect whatever spiritual walk you're on, as long as that spiritual walk is not hurting, like I said, hurting someone or something, then the respect and that you give to that individual and the respect of their religious, path.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's one of the things that I would love to see more people, and especially, women of color, because we've got to stick together as much as we can.
Yeah, and and this whole splintering thing is a new thing. Um, I like to blame integration, and I know that's not the whole story. But there was a time when we had to get along.
Right,
We
right,
didn't have the luxury of stepping outside of our community and
right,
going and getting our needs met elsewhere.
right.
We had to figure it out, and and we did, and we
Yeah.
got on.
And we
Uh,
work well, and we work together, whether we
and we
wanted to
were
or not. We work together.
exactly. And I think it's really time to reclaim that.
I agree. This is a good one. I like this one. This is gonna be it. I'm anticipating your answer on this one. How do we redefine beauty standards? Or should we as we get older, especially as Black women?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I was saying earlier, I have never really been concerned as much with beauty standards. Now, that doesn't mean to say I was not probably one of the vainest creatures out there on the planet when I was younger. I mean, I used to, you want to talk about bad? I mean, I was about vanity. I, I used to get, um, my parents are New Yorkers, and
Oh,
we'd go
okay.
visit my grandmother about every quarter.
Uh,
So we never bought our clothes in Pittsburgh, which is where I am, which is where I was raised. We'd go to New York, visit my grandmother. We'd run down to Canal Street. And my grandmother was a labor organizer
okay.
for the ILGWU, right? And so we knew all the shops, so we could go get all of our stuff. And I always looked fabulous. And when they didn't have what I wanted, I used to get copies of Paris Vogue.
Uh,
And my mother knew a seamstress, and we would take her pictures of the and fabric, and she would make me like these fabulous outfits, right? For half the price that you could get them in a department store.
right.
And we were paying her a fair, decent, livable wage, right? This was her business. She was a seamstress, and so it's not like I didn't. I was always defining beauty for myself because I
Right.
would look at magazine and be like, yes, this fits my body like so because I've always been rounder, and back then I had very curvy and everything was straight up and down, and so
Right.
nothing fit me properly,
Right.
and so I would so so um it's not that I wasn't concerned, but I was concerned with what made me feel good
Okay.
and what made me feel beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And um and then I went to college and I kind of rejected all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I got super radicalized in college. And 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 then I started making my own clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Um and um was largely unconcerned with the male gaze. And back in the 80s, that's when I dreaded my hair. Nobody was dreading their hair in the 80s. I was like the only nappy-headed person walking around. People looked at me like I was insane. And then and then and when the kink fell out of my hair when I grew older, which is a whole different story. But but I still had people what they'd call good hair, as if it ever took me out to dinner or called to find out how I was when I was
Right.
feeling, you know.
All right.
as if we could have any quality that was good or bad. And so I was dread with having come from, more, what is it, 3C hair, or I don't even know what these young people classify hair,
Yeah, I don't know.
right? Um, and and like I said, I rejected the patriarchy outright when I was younger and
Mm,
decided, I wasn't conform. I was not here to appeal to the male gaze.
okay.
And and that is redefining beauty, right? I
Okay.
I look good for me. I wore things that I thought were flattering.
Right.
I um and I think that's more, again, I am less concerned with external changes anymore
Okay.
as I am with internal changes.
Yeah.
And as we change ourselves, other people around us change.
Yeah.
Um, and so we redefine beauty standards by simply being beautiful in whatever that means to us in that moment.
And then, yeah. Yeah. I know for me, I, this gray, which I wish more would come in faster. I just stopped dyeing my hair maybe 8 months ago. I I turned 58 last year, so I just stopped dyeing my hair last year because I just got tired of it and I got tired of doing it and I would have jet black hair. You'll see some of my older even YouTube videos, jet black hair. I love jet black hair. And I just said I'm tired and of doing it. And I said I have to embrace that I am getting older. Becoming gray and I need to embrace it and love it. And now I'm like going, when is it going to get grayer? Because all back here is still dark. When is it going to get grayer? I just want it to be snow white, you
I
know?
My
So I
mother
love it.
Snow White, and it looks so beautiful on her skin. It is amazing. It's, again, I'm here looking at these older women and saying, when is it my turn?
Right.
Because I've got the salt and peppers too, as you can
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
And I never once thought of dyeing my hair. In the
Oh,
same way,
okay.
I stopped straightening my hair when I was 21, and went
Okay.
right to dreads
Yeah.
and stayed dread for years.
Yeah.
And um because who has that much? And for me, the other side of it was, who has that much time
Yeah.
for all of that business? I didn't. I
Right.
had poems to write, I had paintings to make, I had I had so many other things that I felt were so much more important
Right.
than sitting at the hairdresser
Right.
for an
Right.
hour.
Hour, if an hour is a good timing.
An hour,
Some of these ladies are in there 3, 4, 5 hours. I'm like, no.
and then plus, plus childcare. Like, I'm gonna add
Right.
babysitting fees to that too.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
And,
agree.
and I understand for some women. And see, here's the thing too, is we've been trained, right? Here's how the here's how the patriarchy tricks us, right? I noticed
Mm,
my mother had a very hard time being, right? Because what the patriarchy told her were the only legitimate places to just be were church
mhm.
and the beauty parlor. So
Mm.
those were the two places where she could just sit
Mhm.
and be,
Yeah.
rather than saying, I don't even have to leave my house. I'm just going to sit and be
And
for an
B.
hour.
Right.
And so how that redefines beauty in that she didn't have to go through those things or spend that kind of money. Because
Right.
when I was young, I did not have, I was, we had some hard times because I was going to be an artist. I wasn't going to
Right.
work a day job. I was going to carve it out, eke it out. And, and uh, it was a waste of money. I think, you know, I think if we did the math sometimes,
Yeah.
a lot of people, you know, and I don't want to judge because what's important to one person is
Mm-hmm.
not as important to another.
Right. Right.
Somebody may feel that the only way that they feel good in their body
Mm-hmm.
is to dye their hair um, or to spend that time.
Right.
And if
Right.
it's making them feel good, they should do that.
And
What
as
I'm
long.
saying worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that money for other things,
Right.
and I wanted that time
Right.
for things that I felt were important. And 3, I wasn't participating in the patriarchy.
And I'll also say, I think that if you're doing it for yourself,
Self.
not for society or for someone else. Do it for self, period. End of story. So that would be one of the things that I would just kind of, throw out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And but also knowing that there's another way is so important.
Right. And some
Uh,
people, it'll take them a little more time to get to that other way.
mhm.
It might take them more time. So
Or they may see the other way and say, "That's not for me."
that's not right. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
Now, last but not least,
Last but not least.
what does being unapologetically 50 plus, now put the plus on there because 50 plus, mean to you?
Oh, for me,
Mm-hmm.
it is about finally being able to inhabit
Mm-hmm.
liberation
Okay.
more fully.
Okay.
And that's simply because when you're younger and you're trying to put your money pieces, puzzle pieces together, and your parenting puzzle pieces together, and your career puzzle pieces together, um, you're doing you've got there's a lot to manage there.
Mm-hmm.
And as we grow older, there are less the pieces are a little bit like you know how children's puzzles, like as you're younger, the pieces are really big,
Right.
right? And you put them,
Mm-hmm.
and as the child gets older, the pieces get smaller and it's harder and
Mhm.
harder. And then as you age, it goes back to that big
The
puzzle piece.
bigger puzzle.
Easier to put the puzzle
Exactly. Yeah.
together, right? And so because of that, um, before we've done enough financial planning. We've done enough. Our kids are finally grown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so now I can move into even more liberation consciousness,
Okay.
meaning that I am freer to to cooperate with oppression less.
Okay. Got me. Okay.
Even though my entire life I've been doing my best not to cooperate with oppression, there are things we have to do sometimes,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm free now to cooperate less. And so if that means uh, I'm gonna get up and not work today, I'm gonna get up and not work today. Uh, And I'm self-employed, so it
Right,
only,
right,
but even at the job, it's like we can go in and do what's required at this point.
right, right.
Um,
Not above and beyond what's exactly required and no more.
um, and if they have a problem with that, they can early retire us. As
True.
long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, then we shouldn't be having a problem. Um, it means saying no.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I have to go to everything anymore.
Right.
Um, I used to feel I had to go to all the gallery openings and all the performances. I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
I want to sit home with my ancestors, and I don't drink anymore, but I was about to say sit home with my ancestors and drink whiskey. I sit home with my ancestors and they drink whiskey and I have a cup of water.
Right.
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Um, or I'm gonna doodle in my journal, or it means like especially in relation to my art.
Hmm.
um I'm no longer I am less I'm no longer concerned even with the end consumer.
Okay.
It's for me now.
You, yeah.
People are like, you should show this. I'm like, why? I don't feel like it. I have another piece to make. I did it. I love it. It's mine. It lives here now. In fact, I had to send a piece out to a gallery recently, and I was just like, I can't believe I don't want her to go. I don't. Big happy.
So I'm gonna keep this and I'll make y'all another one.
But and that for me is very liberating, because
Yeah.
as you know, especially as an artist, you want to get in every show, you want to get in every journal, you want to get.
Right.
I,
Yeah.
it exists. I did it, and I did it for me.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of why I opened my shop. I opened my shop when around the time I was in my 50s.
Okay.
Was I was tired of asking permission for my um, to do my work anymore. Imagine how hard it is to get funded to
Yeah.
create relics from a Black utopian womanist future in which white people are extinct. Tell me who's going to fund that, right? But I wasn't going to not do the work, right?
Right. Right.
And so I took, so I found, I liberated myself from endless grant writing
Okay.
by taking my work and making it more useful for other people,
Okay.
and let and hope and the sales help me do what I consider my real work, my fine art,
Right. Right.
which talks about things that I think
Hmm.
are very important to talk about. What does
Yeah.
our beautiful future look like?
Right. Okay.
Like when we are really liberated and we've reevaluated, what are those structures?
Right.
How do we govern ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we reinvent technology? It's wonderful. Um, so I'm liberated now to do that. Could I have done this piece in my 40s or my 30s? I don't think so,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think one of the joys is we don't have to. We can choose to play the games that
Right.
everyone likes to play
Hmm.
still, but we have choices now.
Right. And we feel I think at this age too, for the most part, we feel confident in those
Yes.
choices and in our decisions. Not
Yes,
always, but more than we did when we were younger, because we were still trying to people please and all that good stuff.
exactly.
But now we're like, I'm pleasing me. And if it happens to please you and it happens to make you happy on on the tail end, great.
Goody.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, Christina, thank you so much. This has been an amazing talk. I
It
I
has been.
truly I truly enjoyed listening to you and all your wisdom. And like I said, we're gonna there's some things I want to talk to you about from my own selfishness. And but you know, I'd love to have you on at another time. I made a note. I'm talking about I can have her back on and talk about spiritual practices. That could be a whole nother conversation. So I'd love to have you back on at some time when your time permits, and we can have another wonderful conversation.
I'm so glad to be in community with you. And I feel now more than ever, it is so important for us to be forging these kinds of real and tangible connections
Yes.
and having these kinds of conversations. And
Yes.
I'm so grateful to you for having these and for putting them out there in the world and for archiving all these ways of thinking and being that people have,
Thank
so
you.
that people have choices,
Yeah.
that people have options for creating their own visions for
Yeah.
themselves, for
Yeah.
what pleases them. That's
Definitely.
such important work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I sent you my phone number on email, so please keep in touch. And I will definitely, like I said, I want to bring you back on to talk about these spiritual practices because I am so intrigued by them. And I know there's so many different spiritual practices, but you know, you sound like and that you would be a great resource. So I'd love to have you back on when you're available. And we could talk about that too offline. So all right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to subscribe, like, hit the notification. Oh, Christina, where can they find you? I'll put it in the show notes as well, but where can folks find you if they want to look at your art, if they want to read any of your poems? Where can they find you, hun?
Okay, so the best place to find me is christinaspringer.com.
Okay.
If you want to see any of my beautiful designs, like this beautiful silk scarf I'm wearing, um, you can find me at yes.com. And so
Okay.
that's four M's, yes.com.
Okay.
And I have so many different lifestyle objects from socks to suitcases. I got you. You can have your
Okay.
best Black womanist life.
Okay.
I'm there for you. Um, my book, The Splooge Factory, I think you can get it on Amazon, but you can get it through Frayed Edge Press. And
Okay.
that's an examination of race and gender in the fetish industry circa 2000.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I,
So it's a little bit of
okay.
it's in by modern standards, it's not racy at all. But at the time
Oh,
it was written, it was like people were like, "What?" So that's
okay.
that's a wonderful book.
Okay.
Um, and then, but you can find me on my website, and I have
Okay.
some of my visual art up there, and I will probably be adding more another time.
And that's christinaspringer.com. Okay.
Correct.
I'll put it in the description below so everybody can check it out as well. All right, love. Thank you again so much. I truly appreciate you coming on, and we will talk again real soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, you guys. See you later.